Okay, hello and welcome back. It's a little bit more insight into my working world. Usual bearing races and bearing changes. Yeah, I had to weld this one out because the races are really hard to remove. And I thought I'd show you this hub. This is a trailer hub, okay, a certain German-made company, BPW. As you can see here, there's actually no grease in the hub well at all. And the bearing grease is retained by two plates, front and back. Basically, these are 1,000,000 mile hubs, which means the bearings don't ever go wrong. Well, they do when they get older, but basically it's a good system. It just proves that you don't need as much grease as you think you do. Right, so stub axle. Well, you can see the square shoulder on the Land Rover stub axle, and this is to not only for the seal, but it's also for the bearing thrust. This one is tapered, and the engineers have done it a different way because this is the thrust side and this is the taper side that goes onto the stub axle. Okay, it's got a preloads the bearing, but as you can see here, and it wears all stub axles, or the ones that have end float or a certain amount of preload, you can see where the bearing has been pushing and turning. This is will actually show up more if you have bearing play on your hub. And it's also a reason why you check and adjust your wheel bearings regularly so you don't get this wear. Now, basically, I do regular trailer inspections and I look around trailers. And what I tend to do is look to see how much heat has been affecting brakes. Okay. Now, this is generally normal. The disc is clean. The colour is correct. I look over here and straight away by the colour I know that this disc has been overheated. I mean, this is just by experience. And on closer inspection I can see that a set of pads is almost gone. This is all down to the limit, so the pads need changing. However, on closer inspection I can see the disc is cracked to the edge, which is a no-no. Worn discs or overheated discs will crack very quickly, and as you can see here, this is excessively cracked. On the wheel side of the disc, it actually generates more heat and it retains the heat, which means it's more susceptible to damage. Wheel sensor here is also melted, and the wheel bearings, luckily enough, these are ones that are inboard, which are closer to the brake. They have actually messed the grease up because I know that I re-greased these a year ago. Now, EBS systems, they're similar to slab systems or ABS systems, but they have a load sensing system, which the more weight you put onto the trailer, the more air pressure will be applied to the brakes. Now, there's only one brake out of 3 on one side, and since the EBS system is split into 2 banks, left and right hand side, I know that it's not a problem from here. Now, I found that this was actually incorrect, and it was bigger. It was a bigger component than what should be fitted to the trailer, so it's been applying much more brake pressure. And it didn't bind because the caliper was free, the slider pins were free. However, what we've decided to do is to put the right chamber on, which is smaller. It's 20 inch instead of 22, and it's a shorter stroke, which is exactly right for this system. The other one came off a bigger brake disc system, which shows that you should really use the correct components. I think actually that the brake chamber was put on in an emergency to get the trailer to where it needed to go, and it was never changed back. So as a result, we have a cracked disc, prematurely cracked disc, because I checked up on the history of this and it had only been changed a year ago. These should go for a few years. Anyway, with diagnostics, and I can't really point this out enough, is don't just take on what people suggest that it might be. You have to go through checking the system, asking yourself questions, how things work. If you understand how things work and how the system works, obviously I wouldn't expect you to do this on air systems, but it's checking your fluid, for instance, or the pressure, and then mechanical. If, for instance, like your calipers, pins or sliders are free, and you don't have any bind, yet it may be binding your brakes up, for instance, then you may have a fluid problem, and then sometimes that will come down to expanded seals. I did explain this in a video. With this one, I did some extensive checks to see where the air delivery is, to make sure it would release, checked it mechanically, and the only thing that I could find wrong was this thing here, which the servo pushes a rod. The larger the diaphragm area, obviously the correct pressure, it will put more pressure on the disc, and this is what actually happened. The internet is full of problems and people seeking solutions to problems, and I find distance diagnostics very, very difficult to do. Unless I'm there and I can measure it and see it and work things out, I don't really know. Now, this disc here obviously has only a small contact area on both sides of the disc. New parts, this is on a TD5. Plenty of suggestions from people, but without actually measuring and assessing, it's very hard to do. Now, Nick, on the other hand, okay, well, I've asked him a lot of questions, and this is the way people should do when they approach diagnostics, is ask exactly what's happening to get a big picture before they can make an opinion on something, rather than just saying it's one thing or another. And this is, well, I have to get it right. I don't have a choice here at work. I've got to get it right, otherwise it can cause very, very serious problems. Whereas the internet is a different matter, and I'm sorry, I really do just shy away from diagnostics problems. I can tell you how to do things, but on the other hand, I have to leave it up to you to decide to do your checks and everything else, like I do, because I work independently. I have the data available for me, and then I have to assess and check all the time, and this is the way I do it. So my system, and I'll just let you into this, is basically knowing you've got a problem, understanding the system that you have in front of you, then checking the system and making an assessment from there. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. Things like these valves, obviously you can get into them and you can check them electronically, and then you can check things like pressures, and then check things mechanically. Once you've eliminated certain things that will cause problems, you can then focus on things that don't seem normal, and this is the way I do it. Most of the time it's run-of-the-mill, and its experience will take you somewhere, but you still have to check. And yeah, that's all I can say about diagnosis, basically, because it's something you develop in your personality. It's not something that's given to you.